If patients are persuaded to avoid conventional medicine for fear of harmful side effects or because of a distaste for the greed of pharmaceutical companies, they must know that seeking out functional medicine will still expose them to harm while lining the pockets of an even shadier business. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Nina. I'm a certified life coach, and on this channel, I talk about coaching tools, personal development related things, as well as my journey with chronic illness. I am also in the process of getting my degree in applied psychology, which means that I've been really busy. So more than anything recently, what I've been posting on here has been related to my Crohn's disease because I've been having some really exciting developments in that area. Some of the first videos that I posted on this channel were related to my Crohn's disease diagnosis and journey with treatment, including a video in which I detailed my whole experience with alternative medicine. Now, if you can't tell by the title of this video, my experience with alternative medicine was extremely unpleasant and unproductive. So recently, for my degree, I was tasked to write an argumentative essay on a social justice topic, and I chose the topic of functional medicine and how it is a harmful predatory practice. And because I've shared my own personal experience here on this channel with functional medicine as well as other alternative medicines, I also wanted to turn that essay that I wrote into a video essay here for you guys. It's obviously a topic that I feel very passionate about because of my personal experience with it, but I also think that it's a very important topic to bring into greater awareness. Now, obviously, I was inspired by my own experience to write this essay, but I also highly recommend a podcast that I listened to in my process of gathering resources for this paper, which is Dr. Danielle Belardo's Wellness, Fact versus Fiction, specifically the 2 episodes on functional medicine and then 1 episode that she did with an endocrinologist. If this is a topic that interests you, I highly recommend going over there. I'll link the podcast down below, but here I will be summarizing some of the key points from the episodes that I mentioned of that podcast, as well as a number of other scholarly sources. I want you to know as you are watching this that I come at this topic as someone who had full faith in the potential of functional medicine curing me, someone who fell hook, line, and sinker for the predatory tactics that this industry has, and I attribute no blame to anyone who gets fear-mongered by functional medicine or other wellness practices. It is such an insidious industry that is so based on fear-mongering that, of course, being promised this solution that is totally natural and free of side effects is tempting for anybody, both patient and practitioner. But I hope that what I have to share with you for today will be enlightening and helpful. So first things first, it's important to define what functional medicine is. According to the Institute of Functional Medicine is a system biology-based approach that focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of diseases. This definition, in my opinion, is vague, and it gives the false implication that conventional medicine is not interested in addressing or discovering the root causes of diseases. Nevertheless, functional medicine expends enough energy perpetuating the demonization of conventional medicine that it continues to draw a growing demand from customers. In the absence of evidence, functional medicine makes a case for itself through narrative persuasion, marketing itself as natural and holistic while spreading huge amounts of misinformation. This makes it an appealing alternative for the rising population of people who are growing mistrustful of conventional medicine, or for patients dealing with chronic or terminal illnesses that conventional medicine has not found satisfactory solutions for yet. However, in following Hitchens' razor, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The lack of evidence and the stake of its claims makes functional medicine a predatory industry that is not in fact medicine at all. There have long been issues with what functional medicine presents as evidence to support its claims, as well as its use of unvalidated treatment methods, labs, and bespoke diagnoses. In 2014, the American Academy of Family Physicians, or the AAFP, made the decision to no longer offer continuing education credit for functional medicine programs, calling for peer-reviewed, evidence-based literature to be presented on its methods and efficacy. The Institute of Functional Medicine, or the IFM, initially seemed responsive to this criticism, stating an intention to move away from relying on case study reports and begin randomized control trials. It appears, however, that this was a hollow promise. Years following the decision of the AAFP and the IFM's response, functional medicine proponent and author of The Disease Delusion: Conquering the Causes of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life, Jeffrey S. Bland, wrote and published an article in the Journal of Integrative Medicine that defended functional medicine's use of case studies and sought to cast doubt on the credibility of randomized control trials. Despite the lack of evidence to support the effectiveness of functional medicine treatments, Bland proposed that the less than perfect success rates of popular pharmaceuticals at 1 in 4 to 1 in 25 are due to the one-size-fits-all approach of conventional medicine. This is a huge complaint from functional medicine of conventional medicine, that everything is a one-size-fits-all approach and that there isn't enough personalization of illness, treatments, or patients. So Jeffrey S. Bland makes this very popular argument in functional medicine that conventional medicine has a one-size-fits-all approach. And this, to Bland, validates the use of case studies in functional medicine, as according to the field's philosophy, disease is so unique that the treatment of the individual should be too. And this 100% is what got me on board with the idea of functional medicine and other alternative medicines. It's actually a 100% false pretense, but the idea of a personalized treatment plan for you and your disease and the root causes of your particular manifestation of your disease is an appealing narrative for anyone who does not feel adequately seen and attended to by conventional medicine, which are a lot of people because conventional medicine and the healthcare system is so overrun. And we have such limited time with our healthcare providers. And for people who are dealing with chronic or rare diseases that have very limited information around them, this, again, false notion that functional medicine has the answers, that it can take care of your unique manifestation of whatever health crisis you're in, is obviously such an appealing marketing tactic, but it doesn't go any farther than just that, a marketing tactic. Case studies are not good evidence. They are not reproducible, but they can be extremely emotionally compelling, especially to lay people, especially compared to randomized control trials. Stories of individuals overcoming their diseases despite the odds are emotional and aspirational, whereas data from randomized control trials can read as cold or even intimidating. Another huge appeal of functional medicine is the sort of holistic marketing that it has as well, with a lot of attention towards diet and lifestyle. It's worth mentioning, of course, that a holistic approach of dealing with illness, both from a medical perspective as well as from a lifestyle, diet, and mental health perspective, is not unique to functional medicine or any alternative medicine. It is, in fact, standard of practice for conventional medicine. And there is a lot of value in lifestyle recommendations and mental health, self-care for overall health and well-being. But the lifestyle recommendations that come from functional medicine are broad, risky, and lacking in evidence. I have tons of personal experience with this, but one concrete example of something that I found that demonstrates this comes from a blog from a functional medicine practice in North Carolina. In so many ways, it's actually quite an amusing article because there are absolutely no citations, no evidence. It's talking about like serious, complicated health processes, and it's written by a health coach, not a doctor of any kind, not someone who is at all credentialed in the field of practicing medicine. And what it claims is that just a few simple lifestyle changes, like eating fiber, saying no, so practicing good boundaries, laughing with friends, drinking bone broth, and routinely skipping breakfast can prevent all autoimmune diseases. It cites a popular piece of pseudoscience that all autoimmune diseases come from the same root cause, which is a leaky or porous gut lining, allowing bacteria and toxins to seep into the bloodstream and signaling for the immune system to attack its own tissue. This is what functional medicine reduces all autoimmune illnesses to. And this conflicts with evidence-based medicine on a number of counts. In fact, conventional medicine will humbly admit that there is no known cause yet of autoimmune diseases. Now, as someone with an autoimmune disease, that is really frustrating to hear, especially as someone who would love to attack, address, heal my autoimmune disease from the root cause, like functional medicine promises. But in the absence of any evidence to suggest what is the root cause of any autoimmune disease, functional medicine has basically just made one up. And people are quick to accept it because you have no idea, or maybe you do, just how satisfying it is to feel like there is actually a reason, a root that you can point to for your suffering. It feels like you have a whole set of answers that conventional medicine has not found yet. So this idea that all autoimmune diseases arise from this phenomenon of a leaky gut, which is basically a porous gut lining, is interesting. Leaky gut is not a term that is officially recognized by medicine. However, the phenomenon of a porous gut lining is very much validated through medicine, and the association of a porous gut lining with autoimmunity can be seen in IBD, aka Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Now, what's funny is that the primary dietary recommendation for someone in a flare-up of their Crohn's disease or their ulcerative colitis, where their gut lining is porous and compromised, is to avoid foods that are high in insoluble fiber. So that is a far cry from what functional medicine suggests that you do to cure your leaky gut, which is to eat fiber-rich foods, among other silly, non-evidence-based things. One of those other popular recommendations that showed up in this article, of course, also is to routinely skip breakfast, which can also be called intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is a popular wellness recommendation. However, evidence shows that there is little benefit to it. And now functional medicine will admit that the research suggesting that intermittent fasting can be helpful in treating autoimmune diseases is limited and inconclusive. However, what it uses instead to bolster its claims that intermittent fasting should be used as a practice to heal and prevent all autoimmune diseases is the historical and cultural prevalence of intermittent fasting throughout species, pointing to the ancient Greeks' belief that intermittent fasting improves cognitive function. Meanwhile, on the side of evidence-based medicine, a legitimate controlled study demonstrates the cognitive toll of intermittent fasting, leading to worse moods and worse perceived work performance. So not only is the evidence that is used to justify popular treatments in functional medicine not appear to be at all substantiated, but it can be directly refuted by evidence. Now, a huge problem and a common practice in functional medicine is over-testing. The tests used in functional medicine are not the same tests provided by conventional medicine. Some reasons for this would be the lack of validity behind testing used in functional medicine. They're superfluous. They cover things that don't really need to be tested for in order to get important data for treatment of diseases. And potentially most disturbingly, the potential financial relationship between functional medicine providers and popular functional medicine testing companies. But like I mentioned, functional medicine is very persuasive and it is very predatory. And so despite all of these reasons to avoid such tests, functional medicine patients are willing to spend thousands of dollars for the promise of finding the answer to the cause of their symptoms and a path forward for treatment. A doctor here on YouTube named Dr. Michael Ruscio, who I'll link down below, made a great video breaking down whether functional medicine tests are worth it or not. Spoiler alert, they're not. But in that video, Dr. Ruscio shares a story of a patient of his who spent $2,411 on tests and $7,400 overall over a 10-month period seeing a functional medicine provider while suffering with digestion-related complaints. To explain some of the fallacies of these tests, Dr. Ruscio first critiques food sensitivity tests. I've shared on this channel my experience with food sensitivity tests multiple times. It was awful. But to give you some compelling data on the science about why food sensitivity tests are so awful, I'll share with you what Dr. Ruscio shared in that video. So food sensitivity tests measure IgG antibodies in response to food for chronic low-level reactivity. These tests are very popular and very much commercialized. I took my food sensitivity test from Everlywell, which is a direct-to-consumer product, and these tests are totally unvalidated and completely different from the long-standing and totally validated allergy tests that measure for IgE antibodies to test for anaphylactic reactions to common allergens. So I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I got my arm all marked up with a bunch of dots that had different concentrations of common allergens sort of dripped onto them or something. I don't know, I was a kid, and I was monitored to see if any of those dots would react. Luckily for me, none of them did, but for example, for my brother, the dot that was infected with peanut oil or peanuts or something blew up like crazy. But when I took my Everlywell unvalidated food sensitivity IgG antibody test, that was a little Theranos style finger prick blood test situation. So in his video, Dr. Ruscio cites a 2022 study that demonstrates that IgG antibodies to common allergens were no different in healthy and symptomatic participants. And even anecdotally, he shares how people will commonly remark that they find no compelling correlation between the foods that show up on their food sensitivity tests and their actual reactivity. Ultimately, again, spoiler alert, Dr. Ruscio could not see how any of the tests prescribed to his eventual patient could actually add valuable insight on specific treatment. And with exorbitant prices on functional medicine tests not matching their validity or their applicable value, it paints a picture of functional medicine being unnecessary and potentially predatory. Because functional medicine loves to talk about how doctors are making so much money off of you, but functional medicine is a direct-to-consumer service. There's no insurance that any functional medicine provider is going to accept, and they are making so much money off of you, and these unnecessary tests. Now, speaking of these tests, we need to talk about adrenal fatigue, functional medicine's bespoke diagnosis. So another popular test used by functional medicine providers, like food sensitivity tests, is something called the Dutch test. Dutch being an acronym for Dried Urinary Test for Comprehensive Hormones. This test is used to measure various hormone levels throughout the day through dried urine samples. This is a test that I took. From this test, I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, and it seems that the results from these Dutch tests invariably lead to the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue, which is described as a condition in which the adrenals are not functioning properly, leading to hormonal imbalance, big buzzword. Now, the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue, like I said, is bespoke to functional medicine. It is not recognized by any endocrinology society. And the literature used to support the existence of adrenal fatigue is limited and faulty, with the use of unvalidated methods of measuring cortisol, research hinging on false premises, and association-based conclusions. Now, what makes adrenal fatigue just the perfect diagnosis for functional medicine is the lack of specificity in the symptoms, and therefore its high level of applicability, capturing more clients. With symptoms such as tiredness, body aches, weight loss, low blood pressure, and lightheadedness making up the presentation of adrenal fatigue, there is little to support that someone suffering from such a condition is not merely dealing with the effects of stress or sleep or other lifestyle problems. You can't claim that it's an adrenal condition without further, more specific symptoms and more robust and accurate testing. But with the way that functional medicine providers grossly misinterpret the results of Dutch tests, such symptoms can lead to the expensive and unnecessary consumption of potentially dangerous adrenal supplements. A huge problem with both food sensitivity tests and Dutch tests is that they pretty much never lead to negative results, regardless of the literal health of the patient. So in that way, they are great tools for people who are suffering in sort of unspecific ways that too often get turned away by conventional medicine because their symptoms don't neatly fit into something that is treatable, because these tests will invariably tell the patient that they are dealing with something and that there is a solution for that, whether that's true or not. So functional medicine patients might think that they are just taking care of their wellness holistically, but these kinds of tests and their invariably positive results just make functional medicine patients perpetually sick on paper. Meanwhile, lining the wallets of their providers and of the supplement companies that so often have the holy grail product to fix this issue that is made up in the first place. Now let's dive deeper into the false advertising and fear-mongering that exists in functional medicine. The advertising staples in functional medicine include boasting about the natural approach the field takes in prescribing dietary supplements and the demonization of conventional medicine providers and pharmaceutical drugs. But natural is not always better. First of all, make no mistake about it, the supplement industry is a $20 billion a year industry, and an estimated 115 million people take over-the-counter dietary supplements to treat symptoms of chronic illness. Now granted, pharmaceutical companies make hundreds of billions of dollars more than the supplement industry. But unlike the supplement industry, pharmaceutical companies are obligated by law to adhere to ethical, transparent standards. While supplement companies are disallowed from making statements that their products treat or prevent specific diseases, this does not dissuade them from making more generic health claims, such as a supplement's ability to support a healthy immune system. But even vague claims can be dangerous when there is no transparency on efficacy and general dubiousness around the accuracy on the ingredient labels of these supplements. For example, several over-the-counter supplements marketed to treat adrenal fatigue have been found to contain a detectable amount of several hormones. In a study testing the hormone levels of 12 popular over-the-counter adrenal supplements, most were found to contain at least one steroid, and all 12 contained at least some amount of thyroid hormone. The most widely detected of these hormones was pregnenolone, which is a steroid. Other concerning detections included budesonide and cortisol. I make plenty of that on my own without being prescribed it, without my knowledge or consent. Needless to say, this absolutely shatters the illusion that taking over-the-counter supplements is the natural way to go. In that podcast that I mentioned, Wellness Fact versus Fiction with Dr. Danielle Belardo, Dr. Arti Thanguru shares her experience of seeing patients coming from the care of functional medicine providers after being diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. And she talks about how these patients would incur lasting damage to their endocrine system due to the thyroid hormones contained in these over-the-counter adrenal supplements prescribed to them by their functional medicine providers. All the while under the guise that this stuff is natural and holistic. It's literally steroids. So if patients are persuaded to avoid conventional medicine for fear of harmful side effects or because of a distaste for the greed of pharmaceutical companies, they must know that seeking out functional medicine will still expose them to harm while lining the pockets of an even shadier business. And there is, in general, a huge discrepancy between the transparency in functional medicine versus the transparency in conventional medicine, which is a big deal because one of the biggest ways that functional medicine attempts to draw people away from conventional medicine is by perpetuating the myth that conventional medicine providers have a financial interest in keeping them sick and overprescribing medication due to a financial affiliation with pharmaceutical companies. And granted, this fear was very much relevant more than a decade ago, before the enactment of the Sunshine Act in 2010, when there was very little to no transparency around the financial relationship between conventional medicine providers and pharmaceutical companies. But since 2010 and the enactment of the Sunshine Act, all value exchange between medical companies and medical providers is tightly regulated and publicly available. This transparency between functional medicine providers and the companies behind the lab testing that they utilize or the dietary supplements that they recommend does not exist. In fact, one can see such lab and testing companies being spotlighted and sponsoring certification courses on the Institute of Functional Medicine's website. So let's paint a picture here. With the prevalence of overly extensive and expensive testing in functional medicine, the potential of a financial relationship between functional medicine providers and testing companies is unsettling, to say the least. The existence of the Sunshine Act negates the narrative that medical providers are in financial cahoots with drug companies or other medical companies at the expense of the well-being of the patient. The absence of a Sunshine Act equivalent in functional medicine creates suspicion. Now, I briefly mentioned their certification courses on the Institute of Functional Medicine's website. So let's take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the credentials, or lack thereof, of functional medicine providers. The word medicine in the label of functional medicine brings with it the implication of reliable expertise and invokes a sense of trust in the patient that they are in capable hands when it comes to their health. Providers in the medical field, after all, do have a history of extensive time and resources dedicated to their education and qualifications. The requirements, however, for certification through the IFM leaves much to be desired. For roughly $12,000 to $15,000, a functional medicine provider can become certified through the IFM by taking a course on applying functional medicine to clinical practice, a GI course, a detox course, an energy course, a hormone course, a cardiometabolic course, an immune course, a presentation on one case report, and a written exam. Access to these courses does require some prerequisites, but it is far from exclusive, making certification available to MDs, DOs, dentists, naturopathic doctors, dietitians, chiropractors, acupuncturists, nurses, nurse practitioners, and pharmacists. And these may be requirements to become a certified functional medicine provider. However, outside of a few states' regulations, nothing stops anyone from marketing themselves as a functional medicine provider and practicing functional medicine, as functional medicine is a totally unregulated industry. Now, you can perhaps think that the solution to this problem is just to find a functional medicine provider with the highest credentials possible, like an MD or a DO. This, however, does not guarantee quality care in functional medicine. Physicians who look to practice functional medicine are generally internal medicine doctors, not specialized in any one particular field, like immunology, endocrinology, or gastroenterology. However, their functional medicine training emboldens them to treat a host of medical conditions in these specialties and more. In her conversation with Arti Thanguru on her podcast, board-certified physician and preventative cardiologist Dr. Danielle Bellardo mentions how she thought that she knew so much about cardiology after completing her internal medicine residency, and how much she realized she still had to learn when going through her cardiology residency. And in listening to Dr. Thanguru explain the complicated field of endocrinology so succinctly, Dr. Bellardo expresses how she feels she knows so little about endocrinology, despite being tested on it in her internal medicine board exam. To put it plainly, one does not look to a dermatologist to deliver their baby, or a gastroenterologist to perform open heart surgery. Despite the way that they advertise themselves, it is similarly unwise to seek out medical care for a serious chronic condition from a functional medicine provider. So let's talk about the harm that functional medicine poses, especially to vulnerable populations. Medical expertise is highly inaccessible, and therefore patients rely on trusting their medical team. Functional medicine grossly abuses this trust and puts their patients in harm's way. Let's just talk plain and simple about the dangers of functional medicine treatment itself. Though functional medicine purports itself to be a medical solution that circumvents all the potential adverse reactions from conventional medicine, this is categorically untrue. There are substantial physical and psychological risks involved in the so-called natural treatments of functional medicine. For example, red yeast rice. It's popular in Asia for its association with heart health because of the presence of monocolin K, an ingredient that mimics the effect of prescription statin drugs. The naturally occurring presence of monocolin K in red yeast rice does not exclude it from having all the same potential side effects of a statin drug. And the natural or organic quality of the thyroid hormones present in adrenal supplements that come from bovine trachea does not disqualify the product from being potentially harmful. Furthermore, if functional medicine dissuades someone from seeking out conventional medicine, the ineffectiveness of functional medicine treatments can cause a serious medical condition to worsen out of negligence. And the bogus testing that functional medicine employs can create a barrier to a legitimate diagnosis. It can also be speculated that functional medicine's approach of focusing on lifestyle choices as indiscriminately the primary cause of disease can have negative psychological outcomes. I understand that functional medicine's intention behind this focus is to empower the patient to believe that as much as their choices are the cause of their suffering, the solution also lies in their choices. However, there is evidence to suggest a pervasive link between self-blame relating to the onset of a chronic condition and emotional distress. But the negative psychological outcomes from functional medicine treatments does not stop there. An elimination diet, which is a very restrictive diet, it just involves eliminating all of the foods that show up as triggers according to your food sensitivity test is also another popular functional medicine recommendation for patients who are dealing with digestive complaints. And this diet has been proven to pose 3 times the amount of risk for an individual to develop an eating disorder, which is the deadliest mental illness on the planet. So far from being an alternative medical approach that circumvents all possible negative side effects, functional medicine seems to be a medically useless approach that exposes patients to harmful side effects. Then there's the issue of no accountability. Functional medicine boasts that their treatment options protect patients from adverse side effects. So it never prepares the consumer for what could happen if something goes wrong under the care of a functional medicine provider. Many functional medicine and other alternative medicine providers, I'm sure, have good intentions and do not wish to do harm. Unfortunately, for the patient, their path to worsening disease and financial debt may be paved with the functional medicine provider's good intentions. If a patient pays thousands of dollars only to get worse, the frustrating cherry on top is that legally, there's nothing that they can do. It is impossible to hold functional medicine or other alternative medicine providers accountable for their negligence and attain any reparations. They can just take your money, rob you blind, and you get worse, and too bad, so sad. Sucks for you. My experience. Then, of course, there's the ever so pervasive danger of spreading misinformation. The lack of evidence in functional medicine makes it a platform for spreading misinformation. The use of vague but fear-evoking language like toxins sells supplements and detoxifying cleanses while undermining the function of our liver and kidneys. Board president of the IFM, Mark Hyman, has been seen making claims in a 2-minute video on the IFM's website that potential causes of depression are eating gluten, eating too much fish, not eating enough fish, taking acid reflux medication, antibiotic use, vitamin D deficiency, popular one I hear all the time, and pre-diabetes, never referring to traumatic life experiences or the implementation of talk therapy. Then there is the public perpetuation of anti-vaccination rhetoric popular in the functional and alternative medicine community, which in my opinion is an indication of a general pseudoscientific philosophy in the field. The popularity of functional medicine is based in lies and manipulation. And if the train of misinformation were to slow or somehow stop, citizens would be able to see how conventional medicine has some of the benefits that they seek in functional medicine: preventative care, lifestyle guidelines, a holistic approach to physical and mental health, and a lack of conflict of interest between prescribers and providers. As for the promises that conventional medicine cannot fulfill, miraculous cures, treatments void of side effects, all natural solutions, treating the root cause of diseases that have no known root cause yet, functional medicine can't deliver on those fronts either. Fans of functional medicine appreciate the time and attention they receive from their providers, and some do find success in treating their ailments. However, there is nothing to suggest that their improvement is the result of their functional medicine treatments. Meanwhile, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that functional medicine can do more harm than good. So what do we do with all of this information? What is the solution to this obvious problem in the healthcare industry that functional medicine is manipulatively trying to seem like they can fill, while duping people, taking their money, and posing risks and harm to their patients? I mean, I'm just a girl, but in my opinion, I think that with a combination of properly educating the public, providing more resources to healthcare so that patients can have better relationships with their conventional medicine providers, desperately sick people can be spared from the manipulation and abuse from the functional medicine industry, because functional medicine is an industry. It is not medicine, and it exists off of the backs of sick and vulnerable people. If you have made it to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I would love to know what you think about the information that I shared here. I would love to know what your experiences have been with functional medicine. And if your experiences with functional medicine or other alternative medicine has been good, that's great. That's wonderful. I don't want to take that away from you. There's just a difference between anecdotal experiences that work out for some people and perpetuating something that isn't backed by evidence and can be harmful to people, creating false hope and draining people financially. If you're interested in knowing a bit more about my experience with functional medicine and other alternative medicine, you can check out this video right here. And if you're interested in what has worked out for me treatment-wise, I will leave a playlist right here about my experience with the biologic that I'm on right now, Skyrizi. Not sponsored, I just want to share as much information as possible. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to speak to you again very, very soon in one way or another. Bye.